He laughed as the woman's palm closed around the crust. Not a laugh of mirth, but one sharpened by privilege, the sound of a lord who has never smelled smoke or sweat. In the market's cold light, she was small and plain, a widow's braid, a skirt patched more times than it held color, eyes that had learned the map of hunger. He, satin, sigil, the son of the castle steward, tossed a coin and called it charity. He called her gratitude a spectacle. The laugh rang like a verdict, and for a moment, the square felt less like a town and more like a stage built to humiliate. But history remembers more than a single laugh. It remembers how favors calcify into expectation and how a moment of cruelty can plant a seed that outlives a generation. What began as a loaf and scorn became a quiet ledger of debts, not in coin, but in memory. In a kingdom stitched together by alliances, oaths, and brittle egos, that ledger would be opened at the worst possible hour. When winter made men desperate, when banners tore in the wind, and when the very walls meant to protect a lord could be turned into a cage for his conscience. This is not a story of monsters. It's a study of choices, small, civilized cruelties that widen into catastrophe. It is the tale of a woman who learned how to bend survival into power, and of a man who mistook mockery for invulnerability. When the balance finally tips, the roles people assumed for comfort will shatter, and the sound of that first laugh will return to him in a voice he cannot ignore. Before we start, make sure to subscribe our channel so you don't miss history forgotten stories. The year was 1347, when famine had stripped the valleys of everything soft and kind. In the town of Lyrendale, beneath the cold shadow of Highvale Keep, people learned to speak less. Hunger made conversation a luxury. Every morning, the cobbled market square filled with hollow eyes and desperate hands. And in that merciless place, fate wrote its cruelest stories. Among them was Elara, a miller's widow who had lost everything to a bad harvest, and a corrupt tax collector. She came to the market clutching a single copper coin, her last trace of dignity. And across from her, draped in velvet, stood Lord Cedric Halwyn, the steward's son. A man born into authority he neither earned nor questioned. His smirk had the precision of someone who had never been told no. When Elara begged him for bread, her voice was not a cry, but a whisper, tired, cracked, and yet proud. Cedric laughed, tossing her a stale crust from his own table. The gesture meant more to amuse his companions than to help her. The laugh spread among the young nobles like fire catching straw. Elara stood there in silence, her face unreadable, but her eyes, those quiet, patient eyes, saw something he didn't: the fragility of privilege. In the weeks that followed, rumors whispered through the market that the steward's stores were overflowing, while children starved at the gates. Some said Elara began working in the castle's laundry, scrubbing the very linens that covered the tables she once begged beside. She kept her head low, but her mind sharpened like a whetstone. She learned the schedules of the guards, the habits of the cooks, the way servants gossiped when drunk on stolen ale. Highvale Keep was more than a fortress. It was a theater of deceit. Behind its carved oak doors, lords spoke of honor while plotting ruin for one another. Elara moved among them like smoke, unseen but listening, and she learned that Lord Cedric's father, Steward Halwyn, had been hiding debts from the king's auditors. Worse, Cedric had been forging ledgers to protect him. A scandal like that could destroy them both, stripping their lands and titles. Elara said nothing. She simply waited. By autumn, famine turned to sickness. The wealthy fled to their country manors, but the Halwyns stayed, fearing royal suspicion. Cedric's confidence began to crack. Sleepless nights and whispers of rebellion haunted him. One evening, Elara was summoned to bring fresh water to his chamber. He didn't recognize her at first. Her hair covered, her expression blank. But when their eyes met, something flickered in his. Recognition. Shame, perhaps. Or fear.
"Have I seen you before?" he asked, his tone cautious now. The arrogance softened.
Elara paused, her hands steady as she set the jug down. "Perhaps," she said. "In the market." He searched her face, but before he could speak again, the sound of raised voices filled the corridor. A messenger had arrived. The king's auditors were days away. Cedric dismissed her in haste, but she lingered just long enough to hear the panic in his words. His family's empire was about to crumble. That night, while the keep slept, Elara made her choice. She wrote a letter, anonymous, unsigned, detailing every hidden debt, every stolen tax, every falsified account. She sealed it in wax and left it with a merchant bound for the capital. Days later, soldiers arrived. The steward was arrested, his property seized. Cedric watched as his family's crest was torn from the gate. His father was taken away in chains, and Cedric himself was left to face the people he had scorned. In the chaos, Elara vanished. Some said she fled to the countryside. Others swore she was seen entering the old abbey with a satchel of coin, the same gold once hoarded by the Halwyns. The townsfolk whispered her name like a ghost story, though she was no ghost at all, just a woman who had finally balanced the scale. Months later, after the steward died in prison, Cedric returned to Highvale, stripped of title and wealth. He wandered the market, now a beggar himself. One cold morning he saw a woman selling bread, warm golden loaves that filled the air with the scent of life. Her hair was streaked with gray, her eyes calm and steady. When their gazes met, he froze.
"Elara," he whispered.
She looked at him for a long moment, then offered him a loaf. "You look hungry," she said softly. Cedric's throat tightened. His pride, once unshakable, collapsed under the weight of that simple mercy. He took the bread, but his hands trembled as if holding the memory of his own cruelty. Elara turned away before he could speak again. The market's noise swallowed his voice, leaving him alone with the bitter truth that mercy can wound deeper than vengeance. But as dusk settled, something unexpected happened. A rider arrived from the capital with a royal decree bearing the king's seal. And when Cedric broke the wax and read the words, his knees nearly buckled. The decree named Elara of Lyrendale as the new overseer of the royal grain reserves, a post once held by his father.
And beneath that title, a single sentence burned like prophecy.
By order of the crown, all future collections will pass through her hands. Cedric looked up toward the hill where Highvale Keep stood in silence. The woman he had once laughed at now held dominion over everything his name had ever meant. He sank to his knees in the same square where he had once humiliated her, and for the first time in his life, he begged. But Elara did not turn back. The decree changed everything. The same parchment that stripped the Halwyn name of honor elevated a miller's widow to power. Overnight, Elara became the most whispered name in Lyrendale. Some called it justice, others an insult to bloodline. But Elara paid no heed to either. She had known humiliation too intimately to be seduced by praise. Her task was simple, yet immense: to distribute the kingdom's grain with fairness and foresight, in a land where fairness had long been a stranger. Highvale Keep, once the fortress of the Halwyns, became her seat of duty. When she first stepped inside, she paused at the grand hall's threshold. The tapestries still bore the Halwyn crest, though half-torn and blackened by candle smoke. Dust lay thick over the table where Cedric had once laughed as she begged. Now, she stood at its head, her ink-stained fingers tracing the grain of the same wood that had once echoed with arrogance. Her first act was quiet but profound. She reopened the keep's granaries, not for nobles, but for the town's hungry. The same peasants who had once lined the market now entered its gates without fear. Bread was baked in the castle's ovens again, and for the first time in years, the scent that rose from Highvale was not decay, but warmth. But power, no matter how righteous its origins, always draws shadows, and in the flicker of those newly lit hearths, Elara could sense them gathering. The Council of Barons in the capital viewed her appointment with suspicion. A widow of no noble birth controlling the kingdom's food supply was an affront to centuries of hierarchy. They whispered that she had bewitched the king's advisors, that she had manipulated her way into power. Letters of complaint began to flow to the palace. Elara, seasoned by hardship, ignored the whispers, but there was one name among her new staff that made her pause: Cedric Halwyn. He had returned to her doorstep, stripped of rank, seeking work. His petition was simple: to serve as clerk under her supervision. Her advisors protested. "My lady, the man humiliated you. Let him starve as he made you." But Elara's expression did not waver. "Mercy," she said, "is remembered longer than revenge." And so, Cedric entered her service. Each morning, he bowed before her desk, recording grain ledgers under the same roof that once bore his family's banner. She never humiliated him, never raised her voice, but silence can be sharper than cruelty, and every day in her presence reminded him of the laugh that had cursed his life. Weeks turned into months. The famine eased. Lyrendale began to breathe again. Yet beneath the calm, tension brewed. One night, as snow fell quietly over the keep, Elara found a sealed letter slid beneath her door. It bore no name, only a wax mark of the old Halwyn crest. Inside, a warning: "They are coming for you. The barons will not suffer a commoner's rule. Trust no one." The ink was smudged, hurried, and though the handwriting was unfamiliar, Elara knew who had sent it. The next dawn, soldiers arrived under the pretense of royal inspection, but their questions were sharp, their tone accusatory. "The granaries are under your control," one said. "The crown suspects irregularities, missing records, false reports." Elara's composure never faltered. "Then check them," she replied. "Every sack, every ledger?"
For 3 days, they did, and found nothing amiss. But when they left, she discovered something chilling: a single page missing from the royal account books, a page only Cedric had access to.
She summoned him. He entered her chamber with lowered eyes, hands trembling. "You warned me," she said quietly. "Was it to save me or to save yourself?" Cedric fell to his knees. "I swear I tried to stop them. The council demanded proof of theft. They forced me to alter the ledgers, to make it seem as though you hoarded the grain." Elara stepped closer, her face unreadable. "And you obeyed?" Tears streaked down his face. "I had nothing left. They promised me my name restored, My father's lands returned. You thought betrayal could buy back honor," she interrupted, her voice low and steady. "But you learned nothing. You still serve power, even when it destroys you." He clasped her hand, desperate. "Please, Elara, expose me if you must, but they will come for you next. Leave before it's too late." Elara's gaze softened, but only slightly. "You once laughed when I begged for bread," she said. "Now you beg for mercy. The difference is, I will give it." She ordered her guards to escort him to the gate, unharmed but exiled from Lyrandale. He left without looking back. Days later, the Baron's plot collapsed. The missing page was found, planted by one of their own, in a scheme to discredit her. The king himself wrote to Elara, praising her loyalty and wisdom. Her authority was not only restored, but expanded as winter thawed into spring. She stood again in the market where it had all begun. The square was alive with laughter, not cruel, but warm. A young mother thanked her for saving her child. Elara smiled faintly, but said nothing. Then amid the crowd, she saw him, Cedric, thinner, older, dressed like a pilgrim. He lingered at the edge, watching her with hollow eyes. For a moment, their gazes met. He bowed his head in silence and disappeared into the crowd. That night, as Elara returned to her chamber, she found a loaf of bread resting on her table, plain, unadorned, wrapped in linen. No note, no name, just bread. She sat in silence, the memory of that long-ago laugh echoing faintly in her mind, and for the first time, she allowed herself to forgive it. Because mercy, she realized, does not erase pain. It transforms it into power. Cruelty often begins as a jest and ends as a confession. Every small act of kindness, no matter how late, reclaims a piece of our humanity. Power earned through compassion endures longer than power taken by force. If this story moved you, if you believe history's truest lessons are written not in victories, but in remorse and redemption, subscribe to our channel for more real stories of power, pride, and the human heart.